You've probably all heard about conflict resources and in the way how extraction and exploitation of natural resources can drive violent conflicts. And the most common example that we all know are like a couple of conflict minerals that we find in our cell phones, like tungsten, tantalum, gold, coltan. And they have had major impacts and have been really fueling conflicts in the Democratic Republic of Congo, mainly in the eastern part and in the southern parts. And the revenues of exploitation of those resources have actually been used to as a financing mechanism for violent groups in those areas. And I just want to read to you a short quote of the Archbishop of Bukavu, which is one of the bigger cities in eastern Congo, to give you a feeling of how, what the situation is there. Armed men have been free to exploit mines away from any eyes. The formula for exploitation has been to attack civilians, and to do that they harm the women. When the women are raped, the men are forced to flee, the children can't survive, and the village is abandoned. Then the area is free for exploitation. So, this is not happening just in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and not only with these minerals that we can find in our electronic appliances. This is happening with timber, with other resources, with oil, of course, and with diamonds, for example, in Sierra Leone, in Cambodia, in Colombia, this has been happening. And so the revenues of all those exploitation activities have been used as financing mechanisms for these rebels. But environmental factors are never the only cause for violent conflicts. This always happens within a socioeconomic and political context. So if there's a need for a lot of inequality, and this can be inequality in power and empowerment relations between different divided groups, or this can be in economic conditions. And if certain groups feel that they are disempowered compared to other linguistic, ethnic, or religious groups, they will take up violent means as a way to get to an equal power. And so natural resources have been actually an amplifier of those socioeconomic stressful situations, and they have been amplifying in every stage of the conflict cycle. So they can be an amplifier for the outbreak of conflict, so that it more violently erupts or faster erupts. But it also has been making sure that violent episodes have been taken longer, and that peace building processes have been undermined, actually. But as we understand that it's that these resources, that they're only become conflictual based on the socioeconomic and political conditions, they can also be seen as resources for peace building. They can bring a lot of wealth to those societies. And I'm just going to show a couple of really simple and easy statistics to show how important the resources are in most conflictual situations. So 60 to 80% of livelihoods in conflict-affected countries depend on natural resources, and 50 to 80% of post-conflict countries' exports come from natural resources. So these natural resources are very important parts of the economic systems where conflicts are happening, and that's why they're also very important parts if we want to do peace building projects in conflictual situations or in post-conflict situations. They really need to be taken into account in peace building projects and processes. And there are multiple ways how natural resources can contribute to peace. And the first one is they're directly contributing to the livelihoods of the local communities there. And then on a larger scale, they can help recover the economy, and they can build a more stable economy. But not only that, they contribute, many of these resources have been in history and still are managed in a communal way. They're shared resources, and bringing conflicting parties together around the table to talk about the management of shared resources is one first step often in bringing conflictual parties around the table, start discussing again, building confidence, and eventually that turns into more cooperative systems than the conflict that they're used to. And lastly, these revenues from exploitation of natural resources are very important for the governments to actually build their capacity to manage these kind of natural resource systems. And the problem with governance in conflictual settings and in post-conflict settings are that they are very fragile. There are often a lot of corruption, often a lot of inequality in power relations within the government. So that's something that needs to be tackled, but it also needs to be acknowledged that these natural resources form one of the main funding to build this capacity within governments to deal with the conflictual situations. So there have been a couple of voluntary efforts to have a more peace building and less conflict focused approach to sourcing natural resources. And the first one is the Responsible Minerals Initiative. They are an organization in the United States that started in 2008, and they help U.S. companies to track down their whole supply chain and to search whether the minerals they use are coming from conflictual areas or not, and help them guide towards more peaceful sources of conflict. Peaceful sources of minerals they use in their supply chains. So they have been active since 2008, I said, and only since 2014 they were able to actually found conflict-free sources for three of their most important minerals that they focus on: tungsten, tin, and tantalum, which are very important for electronics. So only 6 years after they started, they were able to really confirm for a lot of the companies that they work together with to say, like, okay, we can now say that if you mine from these sources, if you buy from these melters and these processors, that they are actually conflict-free. Then there have been a lot of companies which also have been actively involved in having a more socially responsible supply chain. Like Apple has been doing quite a lot on these the three T's, they call them tin, tantalum, and tungsten, but not so much on coltan, which is also a big problem. We also have Motorola, which does a lot of great things, and Fairphone. And then another project which is more based on renewable resources is called the Peace Parks Foundation. They create nature conservation parks in transboundary areas where there have been conflict before, or where there's conflict at this point, exactly to, as I told you before, bring conflicting communities around the table, to start building trust by talking about conserving the environment, conserving their livelihoods, because a lot of these communities are very agricultural dependent, so they need fertile soils, they need sustainable management of their natural renewable resources. So these voluntary efforts are all very nice and well, but I doubt if many of the people in this room have actually heard about any of these initiatives, and I have the feeling this needs to be taken up to a bigger level, that the consumers are actually aware of what they're consuming. When you buy a phone, when you buy food somewhere, is this sourced from conflict resources, or is this contributing to a peace building project somewhere? So this needs to be brought up to a higher level, and there have been a couple of initiatives where like certification schemes are being started, and that's, for example, a very known one is the Kimberley process for diamonds, and that has been very effective and very efficient, and that is really coordinated by a group of countries, and that has been running very well. Another project, which another institutional mechanism that has started, is the Dodd-Frank Act in the US, which was implemented in 2010, and that requires all US companies to report on tantalum, tin, gold, and tungsten to report on the supply chain. They don't need to say it's a conflict-free supply chain, but they're obliged to report whether it's conflict-free or not. And this kind of like legislative measure has also been pushing the EU a little bit more into thinking about conflict-free sourcing of the minerals for the EU economy. And there isn't really any strict EU regulation on conflict-free sourcing of materials, but they have come to an agreement in 2016, the European Parliament, the Council of Ministers, and the European Commission I'll just put it on the slide here. They have come to the agreement that big EU firms that make or sell such goods will be encouraged to report on their sourcing practices based on a new set of performances indicators to be developed by the EU Commission. Moreover, these businesses will be able to join a registry to be set up by the Commission and report voluntarily on their due diligence practices. So this is a first step in the right direction, but as you can see, businesses are more encouraged, and it's still very much on a voluntary basis that these reporting of a sustainable supply chain is asked for. So I would like to conclude my thinking of this thought with the fact that I guess everybody in this room would never feel like wanting to buy something that people have been dying for in this decade even. Like it's just happening now. If my phone breaks, I go to the shop, I need something quickly, and there's no information or whatsoever on which phone I should buy, what the social impact is of my purchases. Thank you, David. So I would like to encourage the EU to strengthen these policies and to not just keep it on a voluntary basis. This needs to be spread wider. This needs to be more than a voluntary basis. For example, Apple is voluntarily doing it on a certain set of minerals, but not on other ones. So. A good thing would be that they don't only focus on whether it's conflict-free or there is conflict within the supply chain, but also point out to the peace-building potential of these natural resources and point to the positive effects that natural resources can also have within supply chains and for local communities.